Okay, now I'll be careful.
No. All right. Well, I see it is 4:02, and I would like everybody on the call to open this very special session that Grandma Jane has, given us, I'm sure, one of the greatest honor, accepting to come and talk to us. And I would like to start by welcoming all in attendance and thank a number of groups for their unrelenting support for the activities of the Tuskegee University Interdisciplinary Seminar Series, amongst which the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the Tuskegee University Faculty Senate, and I see the chair of the Senate is here, the National Park Services, the College of Arts and Sciences, of Agriculture, Environment and Nutrition Sciences, the Department of Modern Languages, Communication, and Philosophy. And I see many of our deans and heads of departments here. I must acknowledge them. Having acknowledged our supporters and sponsors, I would like to give a very special thank you to Mama Jane Elliott, as I fondly call her. You heard her say the great-grandchildren and everybody call her something. I call her Mama Jane Elliott, for she has graciously accepted to speak truth to power, as she has done for almost 6 or more than 6 decades. So, for those of you joining this series for the first time, or who are on this platform for the first time, it is a platform on which we welcome our public intellectuals, writers, poets, playwrights, novelists, spiritual, moral, political leaders, to help us shed light on the challenges posed by a world turned upside down. We are living in a world that's turned upside down. And today, we are really fortunate to have with us Mama Jane Elliott. I'm not going to introduce her, but I'll just say a few words. She is a firebrand activist whose activism has taken the world by storm. And she led her activism through a controversial experiment. I say controversial, it is not my words, it is their words, because to me, it is not controversial. All geared at showing the basis for discrimination and racism are simply predicated upon a fallacy that nobody is ready to discard. She's been on several TV shows. We can't name them. We cannot name them, whether it's Oprah Winfrey Show, Tonight Show, PBS. In short, Mama Jane needs
Join the meeting.
Introduction. But before I would hand over the floor to Mama Jane, you would permit me do a little bit of housekeeping. And the housekeeping first, I would call on maybe any person representing the office of the president to give us a word or two. And then the chair of the faculty senate, a word or two. And I would request that everybody coming in mutes the microphone, and we will give Mama Jane the opportunity to talk to us until she finishes. When she finishes, there would be opportunity for Q&A. So I would expect that And if you have questions, you might just put your questions on the chat directly to me so that when there is time for Q&A, I could read the questions in the order I received them. So I would give the room to somebody in the office of the president, provost, or the faculty senate chair to say a word. In that order, if there is nobody in the office of the president and there is nobody in the office of the provost on the call, then I would request the chair of the faculty senate, who is here present, gives us a word.
Thank you, Dr. Andy. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Ms. Elliott, it's a transfiguration for us to be here and watch you live. It's like a dream. I've been showing your videos in my classes for the last 15 to 17 years, every semester.
Good. Good.
Had a whole range of reactions. The impact that you've had, that you continue to have on all of us, there is no name for that. And it is such an honor to have you here with us today at Tuskegee. Thank you, Professor, for making these types of magical encounters possible. Thank you to my students who are here. I'm glad that you can see this legend in person, as it were, and I wish to everyone welcome and thank you again. Back to you, Professor.
Okay, thank you very, very much. So I was wondering, is Dr. Faye Jackson here from the office of the provost? No? Anybody from the office of the president? All right. If not, I am going to call on all of us on this call to unmute ourselves and give Mama Jane a big TU welcome at the sound of TU. So unmute yourself. When I say give her the welcome. Deserves.
Let's get to it, people. I'm glad to meet all of you. Let's get to it. Let's get to it.
TU.
No. We applaud you. That's nice, but I'm 89 and I'm not going to live forever. So let's get this done before I keel over. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks again, Mama Jane Elliott. You have the floor. Thank you.
I have the floor. That means you can all hear what I'm going to say, right?
Yes.
Well, that's a good news and bad news. And I want you to know that many of you are really going to hate me very shortly, because that's my job, to make people think of things in a whole different way. And here's something I need for everybody to know. And this is very, very simplistic. And you're going to say, why am I listening to this nonsense? But just listen to it. We have the cure for racism in our hand. According to people in this country, there are 5 races. Now look at the fingers on your hand. Put your hand in front of your face. Am I still with you? Because I can't see you.
Yeah.
Okay, you're still with me? All right, do this, sir. Put your hand in front of your face so you can see it. You see these 5 fingers? All right, the first finger, we call it a color groups. The first finger is the white group. See how small it is? It's the smallest one of all. The second finger is the black group. It's not much bigger than the white group, but it is bigger. The third finger is the brown group, and that is the largest finger on your hand, and it is the largest population of people on the face of the earth, because we are all shades of brown. The next finger is the yellow group. There is no such thing. And the last finger is the red group, who do not exist. There are no red people. The only finger on this hand that shows you the color of the human race is the brown finger. Now, every time somebody does this to me, I say, wonderful, you've heard me talk about the brown finger. And then they say, that's not what I mean. People, Each one of these fingers alone has very little power, but when you bring them all together into one race and one group, you have the power to smash the wall of racism. And while you're at it, you can smash the wall of sexism and ageism and homophobia and ethnocentrism. We could do this if we bring it all together and all of us work on this together and stop thinking of ourselves as different colors. We're only one color. And what color is that? Let's all do this at the same time. Put up your finger, put up that little finger, people. I can't see you. I'm waiting to see that. All right, now that's the brown, that is the, all the people on the face of the earth are that shade, are shades of brown, people. We are all shades of brown. There are no black people, there are no white people, unless you go to Tanzania, where there is a large group of people who suffer because they don't have enough melanin to protect themselves from the rays of the sun. You need to study Tanzania. Look up Tanzania, but don't do it now. I'm telling you that my main pain for the last 55 years, and particularly now, is those people who talk about biracial and multiracial people. There is no such thing as a biracial person. There is no such thing as a multiracial group. There is only one race of human beings on the face of the earth, and that's the human race. And we are all members of it. If we don't stop using the language of the 14th and 15th century, we will never get over this problem, folks. You need to realize that we all of us, I don't care who you're talking to or who you're talking about, we all, if we would trace our DNA back far enough, would find out what the percentage of our DNA came from a country in Africa. Now, you are all my 30th to 50th cousins, whether you like it or not. That's the way it is. You are stuck with me. My great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents started out in Africa, and so did everybody else's. When we have taught, we absolutely teach racism in the schools in this country and in every other country. We teach racism because that's what we have learned, and that's what we teach. I didn't know I was a racist until the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. I thought I was doing a good job. After all, I was a teacher. And I put my third graders through an exercise in eye color, which I based on what I learned from Adolf Hitler. One of the ways Adolf Hitler decided who went into the gas chamber was eye color. If you had blue eyes, you were probably a good German citizen. But if you had brown eyes, you might not be a good German citizen, so they called you something else and they threw you into the gas chamber. Or if you were a baby, they threw you up in the air and used you for target practice. That was based on eye color, people. And I learned about eye color because I was born in 1933. That's the year Adolf Hitler and Franklin Roosevelt came to power in their respective countries. And from 1933 till 1945, I heard my father just ranting about what he was hearing on the radio and on the screen when he went to the movie on Saturday afternoon about Adolf Hitler and what he was doing in Germany. He was furious for 12 years, and he should have been, because what was going on made no sense. But to a whole bunch of German people, it made perfectly good sense. My father said, this will never happen again. And those who fought the Second World War said, this will never happen again. And then, lo and behold, in 2016, here comes a man to run for the presidency of the United States, whose favorite book is in a locked drawer in his bedside table, and it is the writings of Adolf Hitler. And the book is The New World Order. That's the book that Donald Trump used to decide how he would govern in the United States of America. The minute I heard him speak when he started to run for the presidency, I thought, this is Hitlerian. And I said, here, Jane, you're imagining it. You're exaggerating. This is not about Hitler. And then I read the book, When at Times the Mob is Swayed. If you can get your hands on the book, When at Times the Mob is Swayed, you'll find out why Donald Trump behaves the way he does and why so many countries all over the world are following his lead. Because demagoguery works. Has worked well. In the last 6 years in this country, we have dealt with a demagogue, and you need to know that. And you need to know that he patterns his governing principles on Adolf Hitler's. Now, I'm angry about that, and I realized that when I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. That was what Adolf Hitler did. So I watched what happened. Oh, God, the day after Martin Luther King. I was coming home from school the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. I had the teepee under my arm because my third graders were going to study the Indian unit. And we were going to put up the teepee the next day. We were going to sing Indian songs written by white folks. We're going to read Indian stories written by white folks. We're going to learn the Sioux Indian prayer, which they learned from white folks, which says, "Oh, great spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." The telephone was ringing when I walked in my back door. I answered the telephone. It was my sister. And she said, "Is your television on?" I said, "No." She said, "You better turn it on." I said, "Why?" She said, "They shot him." I said, "Who did we shoot this time?" In a joking manner, because we were in a shooting mood at that time. And she said, "Martin Luther King Jr." And then my world stopped. I swear to you, the world stopped spinning because Martin Luther King Jr. had been one of our heroes in February in my classroom. And here he's dead in April at the hands of an assassin. And I couldn't believe that this could happen again in this country. So I washed and dried the teepee. I fed the kids. I put them to bed. I spread the teepee out on the living room floor. I turned on the television, and this was the night after Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. And there was Walter Cronkite saying to 3 leaders of the Black community, "When our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line?" When JFK was killed, his widow held this country together. I thought, oh my God, what has he said? His widow held this country together. I don't have to listen to this. So I changed the channel. And there was another brilliant white male saying, "Don't you Negroes think you should feel sympathy for us white people because we can't feel the anger at this killing that you Negroes can?" And I thought, that's it. That is it. I've had all I can take right now. I shut off the television. I rolled up the teepee. I threw it into the bedroom closet. I went back out in the kitchen. I got my husband's supper. He was working in a factory at that time. He came home and he put his arms around me, and I started to cry because something just unbelievable had happened in my lifetime for the 3rd time. This isn't supposed to happen to leaders in the United States of America. And he said, "They shot him, didn't they?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Daryl. I'm going to teach my students the Sioux Indian prayer, and then I'm going to arrange to have it answered for them." He said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I'm going to give some of my students the chance to walk in the shoes of a child of color in my classroom for a day." He said, "What are you talking about, Jane? What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to separate my students according to the color of their eyes. Adolf Hitler did it, and it worked for him." He said, "You'll lose your job." I said, "Daryl, if I lose my job, I don't want to teach in this system anymore. If it's wrong to teach the truth, then I don't want to teach here." He said, "You better be careful. You're going to lose your job." I went to sleep and I said, the only prayer I ever say anymore, "Oh Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Oh Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace." I said it over and over like a mantra. I learned within 15 minutes the next day, within 15 minutes of school starting, that I did not want to be a minister of peace. What can I do for you, whoever's talking?
Join the meeting.
Okay, am I not in the meeting? Have I left the meeting? Am I still there?
Yes, you're still in the meeting. It is somebody else joining.
Okay, well, congratulations, we're happy to have you. Now,
It's an automatic response. So every so often when somebody comes in, you may hear a recorded voice saying the name of the person and then has joined the meeting.
okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to know that. I got ready for school the next morning. I walked to the door. My husband said, "Have you changed your mind about that thing?" I said, "No, I haven't." He said, "You're still going to do that?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You're going to lose your job." I said, "I'm going to do it, Daryl. I'm an educator. I'm not a teacher. I'm an educator." People, the word educator comes from the root ductus, which means lead, the prefix E, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And if I had gone into that classroom the next day and said, "Well, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot last night. That's too bad. Now let's turn to page 28 in our math book," I would have been a really bad educator, but a really good and accepted teacher. I decided that it was important that my students get led out of the ignorance of racism. So I went into my classroom. I'll never forget the first child, Stephen Armstrong, came into my classroom and they said, "Mrs. Elliott, they shot that king last night. Why'd they shoot that king?" And I said, "We're going to talk about that, Stephen." So after we had done the things you have to do first thing in the morning, first we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Now think about that, folks. In 1954, the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag said, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In 1954, the Congress of the United States lobbied their congressmen, the people in the United States, the Christians, lobbied their congressmen to get the words under God inserted into the pledge. And they put it just before the words indivisible. In other words, what we did was put in the word under God just before the word indivisible, and thereby divided the people who say it into those who believe in God and those who don't believe in God. After I had taught third grade for several years, I finally caught on to what we were doing. And I said, boys and girls, if you don't want to say the words under God in the pledge, you don't have to, because some of you don't believe, your parents don't believe in praying publicly, and neither do I. So if you don't want to say the words under God in the pledge, well, I had some parents call and protest to the principal because I was obviously an atheist. I'm not an atheist, but I don't think that everybody has to run their religion or lack of it the way I run mine. So that morning we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag with the words under God in it. We sang God Bless America, which is a hymn, but it's got some really good rhythm and it's easy to sing. And then we started to talk about the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. And I asked those kids finally, what do you know about Black people? Because in my country, we refer to people who are other than light-skinned Black as Black. It's a lie. It started during the Spanish Inquisition. The word Black should never have been used to describe people. There are no Black people. There are no white people. Those two colors do not exist in human skin unless there's something wrong with you. People, if you look up the word Black in the dictionary, it says savage and evil, savagery and evil. You look up the word white and it says pure and good. Now, a little kid comes in who is melanaceous or melanotic, and the teacher takes one look at him and says, oh, another little Black boy. She has told that kid how the kid knows she feels about him because she used that word. I understand why people would rather be called Black than African. However, you will always be from Africa, but you will never be Black. You'll be very, very dark brown to almost Black, and that's what it says in the dictionary. And you will never be white unless you are suffering from too little melanin in your skin to keep you healthy. I'm tired of those words. I'm sick of those words. But at those days, I used those words because those were the accepted words. I was shocked at what those kids knew about Blacks, and none of them had ever been in the presence of a person who was other than what they call white. I finally said, do you kids have any idea how it would feel to be something other than white in this country? No. Would you like to do something today that will help you to know that? Yeah, it sounds like fun. Yeah, let's do that. I said, are you sure you want to do that? Yeah, let's do that. I said, all right, today we're going to judge people by the color of their eyes. And since I'm blue-eyed, and most of the students in this room are blue-eyed, brown-eyed people are going to be on the top the first day. What do you mean? I said, I mean that brown-eyed people are smarter than blue-eyed people. They're cleaner than blue-eyed people. They're more civilized than blue-eyed people. Give blue-eyed people something nice, and what do they do with it? Immediately, one of those kids said, they mess it up. Look at her. She always has a dirty desk, and she's got brown eyes. And I thought, oh, my God, here we go. Here we go. These kids know exactly how to act like racists because they have watched me for the last 7 months, and they have watched their other teachers for 9 months at a time, and they have listened to their parents and to their other teachers and to their preachers. I couldn't believe the things that those kids were willing to do to one another because some of us were on the top and some of us were on the bottom. I watched what had been cooperative, loving, kind, generous, really wonderful students who were brown-eyed that day become arrogant, vicious, rude, judgmental, unpleasant little people. And I couldn't stand the sight of them after the first 2 hours. It was unbelievable how willing they were and how able they were to know how to hurt you and where to hurt you. I made the blue-eyed people take their desks to the back of the room. I brought the brown-eyed people to the front of the room. And I said, now, blue-eyed people aren't smart as brown-eyed people. And at that moment, in the front row, one of my students looked up at me and said, how come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes? I never felt like a child before as I felt about that child at that moment, and I never have since. I thought, my God, it's doing to me. She is treating me as if I am less than she is because of the color of my eyes. And then Ellen in the back row spoke up and said, if she didn't have them blue eyes, she'd be the principal, the superintendent. They're both brown-eyed. They weren't both brown-eyed, and he didn't know what color eyes they had. But he did know that he had to make it all right to be blue-eyed. And the only way he could do that was to assign that characteristic to somebody in power. People, I learned more during that lesson, in that classroom, on that day, than I ever learned in a college psychology class. I watched children who were brilliant little students become unable to perform the day they had the wrong color eyes. On the other hand, I watched 3 dyslexic boys who were brown-eyed read words I knew they couldn't read and spell words I knew they couldn't spell. Now, will you please turn on the camera so that I can see you folks, because all I see is a big J in an orange box here. Could you fix that for me, please? Thank you very much. I would rather see your face than that orange J. You are much more attractive than that box. I couldn't believe what was happening. I watched it. I cooperated with it. I caused it. And then I watched what it did to my students. And I had taken all the courses. I knew about expectations, but I had never seen what expectations can do to a child if he is expected to not to be able to learn. If he expected to be a loser, he will lose. And I realized what I was watching. I realized what had happened with those kids in that classroom. It was horrible, horrendous. At the end of the day, the kids went home. Usually they'd say, "Can we stay till tomorrow? We can stay overnight. We could do this again tomorrow." They didn't say that day. They were just glad to go home. That day, I pulled down the map, the roller map at the front of the room. I pulled the map down, the ring slipped off my thumb. The map went around and around and around the roller that wasn't the way it does in that old Centering commercial. And I said, "Well, I've done it again." And little brown-eyed Debbie in the front row looked at me and said, "Well, what do you expect? You've got blue eyes, haven't you?" And I thought, "We little shit." And then once more, Alan Moss saved my life. He said, "Oh, Debbie, it isn't because of her eye color. She never has been able to do that, right?" I thought, there's my Uncle Tom. He'll go along with this in order to get somebody on the other side willing to communicate with him. What have we done? What have we done for the last 400 years? It makes no sense. You need to realize that the word race, to mean a specific group of people, came out of France in 1580. 1580. So when people say to you, "This has been going on forever, this is the way it's supposed to be," they're flat out wrong. It hasn't been going on forever. The word race came out of France to mean a separate group of people in 1580. For God's sake, people remember that. I went home that night. I didn't want to come back to school on Monday because I had heard those blue-eyed boys in the boys' room talking about what they were going to do to those brownies when the brownies got on top. I didn't want to come back to school. Some ugly things happened over the weekend because parents heard about what had happened in my classroom that day, and we lost several families as our friends just because of that exercise. That day, that quickly, those people were angry at what I was teaching my 3rd graders. On Monday, I went back into the classroom. First kid came in. They said, "Are we going to do?" I said, "Don't ask me what we're going to do. Blue-eyed people were on the bottom on Friday. They're going to be on the top today." The blue-eyed boys were absolutely delighted. Separated them according to the color of their eyes, put the blue-eyed people in the front of the room, and the most amazing thing happened. Those blue-eyed kids were much less vicious to the brown-eyed kids than the brown-eyed kids had been to them. I thought, is this really happening? Are these kids pulling my leg? Is this what's going on? I didn't see blue-eyed people mistreat any brown-eyed person on the day the blueies were on the top. Now, when I'm looking at your screen, all I'm seeing is this woman bouncing around and talking, and she's not listening to me. So she doesn't know the listening skills. So put me back on the orange square, because I'm going to teach you the listening skills, and you aren't going to like them. Okay? You got it?
Yeah.
Send me back to where I was. Thank you. There you are. There you are, sir. That's good now. We finished the day with the blue-eyed people on the top, the brown-eyed people on the bottom. The horrendous things that had happened on Friday didn't happen again on Monday, which was absolutely amazing. So on Tuesday, before we discussed the exercise at all, each child had to write a four-paragraph composition telling who Martin Luther King Jr. was, how the child felt on Friday, how the child felt on Monday, and what discrimination is. When they had finished writing, we got in the magic circle, and in the magic circle, whatever you say will be dealt with. You can say whatever you want to, but it will be dealt with. And the first thing I asked those kids was, "You blue-eyed boys said you were going to get even with the brownies when you got on top. Why didn't you get even with them?" And almost in a chorus, those boys said, because we found out how it feels to be on the bottom, and we didn't want to make anybody feel the way we felt when we were on the bottom. Now, if we could just teach that fact to the Proud Boys and the QAnons and the KKK and the 3%ers and the Oath Keepers and the Republicans and the Trumpians in the United States of America, we could solve the problem of racism in the United States of America. If we could just tell these pale, stale males that they don't have to worry about people of color trying to get even with them. All they have to do is change the way they behave today so that they will not be treated in the future the way we have treated those who don't look like us in the past. There's an answer for this program. There's an answer for this problem, and it's called education. Teachers can't do it because teachers teach facts and figures and get kids ready for the end of term testing. An educator who leads people out of ignorance could turn this thing around. If every third grade teacher would do that blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise for 2 days in her classroom, his classroom, whoever's classroom, you would have a school community that was totally different from the school community the communities that you have today. But first you have, and you don't have to have parents agree with you. Many of the parents didn't agree with what I did, but when their kids came home from school, and I know because at teachers conference the following year, when I did it the following year, and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation made a film of it first couple of weeks of school, then when parents came to the parent-teacher conferences, they would say things to me like, "Thank God that you have my child." Why? Because he came home from school and he refuses to listen to anybody use the N-word. And I said, "And you're telling me that I'm caused that?" She said, "Absolutely. We know what you did with our child. You have made a difference. We're even glad to see him get off the bus now." That kind of remark was made to me by parents whose children went through the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in the first semester of third grade in subsequent years. People, I know that racism is a learned response. We teach it on a daily basis. In my country, we teach racism on a daily basis. We teach that Columbus discovered America because we refuse to admit that the first people who discovered this land and every other landmass on the face of the earth came from Africa. And if you don't believe it, you get the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018 and look at the map in that magazine. And it shows you where, in 2 waves, people from Africa populated every landmass on the face of the earth. Now, you can argue with this until hell freezes over, but get the magazine and look at it. Put that map, get it, enlarge it, have it laminated, put it up on the wall of every classroom in every school in your country, in every school on your continent, because students need to be told from kindergarten that here's where we all came from. We all came from a continent, from a country on the continent of Africa originally, every single one of us. I had this argument with a young Japanese friend of my daughter's, and she said, "My people didn't come from Africa." I said, "Well, where'd they come from?" Well, she said, we came from Peking Man. I said, "Well, let me tell you what you need to do. Go home, get your DNA test, and trace it back as far as you can, and then let me know what you find out." She sent me a letter 2 weeks later and said, "Mrs. Elliott, you were right. My great-great-grandparents, my ancestors were some of the first people from Africa to come to this country." People, every one of us could say that, because my foundation is from Africa. That's the way it is. And we need to remember that, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to be grateful for that, and we need to be proud of that, because that means that we are members of the human race. There's only one race, people. It's time to forget about black, white, red, yellow, brown, and just think brown. There's only one race, and we all come in shades of brown. Now, somebody is writing a book about what I do, and he's got so much stuff in it, they've got to put it into 2 books. The first book is going to be called Shades of Brown, and the second book is going to be called One Race. Because, people, there's only one race of people on the face of the earth. Now I know what you're thinking. All right, you've said that often enough now. We know that now. Okay. If you haven't something that you want to sell to people, yet they have to see the advertisement at least 4 times before they'll buy that piece of stuff. I'll have to tell you over and over and over again that there's only one race, because it takes a lot of time for you to hear that. And the more often you hear it, the more likely you are to believe it. Say it. We are all the same. We aren't all the same. We all came from the same continent. We all came from the same continent, but we are not all the same. I think differences are tremendously important. I think you, sir, and I are not the same. We're the same race, but we aren't the same color. We aren't the same gender. We probably aren't the same age, because I'm older than dirt. You are, I know that, but I am. So we aren't the same in those areas. But we do have the right to be treated fairly. In my classroom, we taught the 3 R's, not reading, writing, and arithmetic, because only one of those begins with R. Reading begins with R, writing begins with W, and arithmetic begins with A. So let's stop talking about those three. And let's start talking about the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility. If we would teach children that every person on that campus has the right to be respected, and that they will be expected to respect everyone, and they will be held responsible if they don't respect everyone, we could change this thing around. And we have to change this thing around. We have to change this in the United States of America, and too many countries worldwide copy what goes on in this country. And what's has gone on in this country for the last 6 years is not something I want people to copy. The last 2 years haven't been bad. The 4 years before that were absolutely unacceptable. My kids learned about rights, respect, and responsibility, and I don't think that's unreasonable. I believe in CRT, not critical race theory. It's ridiculous, because the word race, you throw the word race in there without realizing that there's only one, and you've caused yourself a problem. And it's a theory. What I'm telling you is not a theory. It's a fact. There's only one race. I believe that CRT should stand for Curriculum Respecting Truth. And if we would start teaching a curriculum respecting truth, we could do away with racism in 2 generations. There isn't a doubt in my mind of what we could do away with racism in 2 generations. My 3rd graders went up to junior high. They went through 4th grade, 5th grade, and up to junior high. And one day my sister was substituting at the junior high level, and the English teacher came down for lunch, and she was just furious. The worst thing happened in my classroom. Well, Mrs. K, what happened? I used the word, and this is what she said, I used the word bigger. And one of my kids stood up and said, we don't use that word in this school. And if you're going to use it, I'm going to go out in the hall until you stop. And she said to my sister, what would you have done? And my sister says, well, I guess I'd stop using that word. Well, I guess I'd stop using that word. That's a word that you shouldn't have used with your students. Immediately, that caused a problem for everybody, because this woman used that word constantly until she got some of my former students who had the courage to stand up and say, we don't use that word, Mrs. K. She was angry then, and she remained angry for a very long time, but she stopped using the N-word. Is that progress? As far as I'm concerned, that's progress. As far as that teacher was concerned, that was regressing. That was taking her back to her child when somebody told her how to behave. Folks, if you don't know how to behave, somebody has to teach you. And I'm perfectly happy to educate people who think the N-word is a perfectly acceptable word for anyone, used by anyone, unless you are a person of color, for whom that word is very important. Unless, however, when you use it around other people, it simply says, I'll accept this word, and I'll accept all the ugliness that goes with it, all the ugliness with which it began, and all the ugliness with which it is perpetuated. It's time to give it up. I've learned more than I wanted to know. I've learned that words are the most powerful weapon designed by human beings. We kill people with words all day, every day. All you have to do is say about 4 words, and you can destroy the self-concept, the self-image of a child in your classroom. I know it. I've watched it happen. I've watched it happen day after day in schools all over the United States of America, at the college level as well as at the kindergarten level. It's time to educate the educators. We haven't done a good job of that. The first thing I learned when I started teaching 3rd grade was to teach the listening skills. 60% of what you learn comes to you through your ears. 60% of what you learn comes to you through your ears. So I teach the listening skills, and I expect them to practice them. And every teacher should expect their students to practice the listening skills. Number 1, good listeners have quiet hands, feet, and mouths. When you're scratching your head or writing when I'm talking, you aren't listening. Number two, good listeners keep their eyes on the person who is speaking. That's pretty hard when you're having to listen to an old, angry white female, but that's the way it is. Number three, good listeners listen from the beginning to the very end. If you teach that at the college level, at the elementary and junior or senior high school level, you don't have those girls raising their hands all the time to get attention from the teacher. Number four, good listeners decide to learn something. Now, you could learn something from what I have to say here today, no matter what your age, no matter what your gender, no matter what your religious belief, no matter what your skin color. You could learn something from hearing what third graders go through, little white, so-called white third graders, when they go through that exercise and demonstrate and exhibit all the behaviors that I see in women and in people of color all over the United States every day. They are resisting an unfair situation. And if you don't resist an unfair situation, the unfair situation will continue. I believe in people protesting. I don't believe in people shooting one another, but I believe in people protesting and protesting at length. And I believe that these young people who are protesting today are protesting, all colors of them are protesting. And invariably, when they're viewing a protest, the commentator on the television says, people of all races are in this group. And I think, oh my God, here we go again. And about 3 weeks ago, our president signed a law making interracial marriage legal. Making interracial marriage legal. Now, I haven't gotten my hands on him yet, but I will, because somebody has to say to him, what you're saying is that the only marriages that are legal are those between an earthling and someone from Mars. Because we are all members of the same race. You can't have an interracial marriage as long as you realize that there's only one race. Do you see how angry? And I get at these things, and I want to know why you aren't angry. I want to know why anyone allows anyone to use the word biracial or multiracial in their presence. It is a lie, built on a lie, perpetuated by liars, and we need to do away with it. In the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, when we put the words under God in the flag, we've got to take it out. People for skin colors aren't real. Black isn't real, white isn't real, yellow isn't real, brown isn't real, red isn't real as skin colors. Only one skin color is real, and that's red. I've learned more than I wanted to know by using the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. I found out that you can push Christians just so far before they turn into something that is totally unchristian. Because my children, my offspring, went to school in that system, after 3 years after I did the exercise, the principal's wife, who worked at the high school level, came to me at a teacher's meeting and said, Jane, you've got to get your kids out of this school. I said, why? She said, because these teachers are trying to destroy your children and they're enjoying doing it. I said, you're serious? She said, absolutely. Your children will never graduate from high school in this school system. Get them out of here. So we moved. We moved 17 miles from there so that my children would not be treated badly, not because of their skin color, but because of the ignorance of the educators in that system. Now, people, skin color is not and has never been, racism is not and has never been the main problem in this country. The main problem is self-imposed ignorance. And if you are an educator and you are acting through self-imposed ignorance, you are going to support the ignorance of the people in your community. And instead of leading them out of ignorance, you are going to go along with that ignorance in order to be accepted by them. There is an answer to this problem, and the answer is education. In my country right now, we have all these groups of pale, stale males walking around being angry because they're scared to death. Many of the white males and so-called white males in the United States of America are afraid that when people of color become the numerical majority in my country, and they are, within 30 years, people that call themselves white in the United States of America will have become a numerical minority in the United States of America. And white males are scared to death. They are going to be treated by people of color the way they have treated people of color. I think they're fearing the wrong thing. I've watched people of color, I've listened to people of color, I've seen what they're talking about, and I realize that they don't want to get even. I think they want to get equity. And I think it's time that we provided them with equity. We have lived with this nonsense long enough. Now, of course, several years ago, I've had some interesting experiences. Several years ago, the Methodist minister, and I was a member of the Methodist Church for years, the one in Osage came out to my house and brought something for my son to use to learn how to shoot traps. Now, I didn't know how to do that, but he was going to teach it to my son. So he was out on the yard and he taught my son how to use this thing. And then he came in the house and he said, maybe we could have a conversation, Mrs. Elliott. I said, well, certainly could. Sit down. So we sat down. We had a very short conversation because then he stood up suddenly and he walked to the door. He turned around, he looked at me, he said, Mrs. Elliott, could you do me a favor? I said, well, I will if I can. What would you like? He said, could you find another place to worship on Sunday morning? I said, well, yeah, I could do that, but why would you ask me to do that? He said, because my parishioners don't like the words you use in the service. I said, oh, you mean when I say Mother of God or Mother of Jesus, or when I say God the Mother, or when I say she instead of he? Said, that's it. They don't want to hear that anymore. I said, well, I suppose I can find another place to worship. And we just happened to live in an old schoolhouse next to an old Baptist church. And he said, you've got a church right next door here. Why don't you start a church of your own? I said, maybe I will. Would you like to join? He said, no, I don't want to join your church. And he took off, literally running for his car. He jumped in his car and took off and stormed off down the road. I was standing there laughing like you are. I was laughing and I thought, he thinks the devil is chasing him. Oh my God, I should go get my pitchfork. And I stood there and I laughed and I thought, this is too bad. That man actually thinks that if you use a word other than the word they're accustomed to hearing in the service, you must not be a good Christian and you don't belong in that church. It was the most amazing, one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. I've been hit because of this exercise. I've had a knife pulled on me. I've been threatened with death numerous times. I get really ugly mail. I wish you could see my mail. It's kind of interesting. If people would do to me what they're threatening, I used to think that would be awful. But on the other hand, living with some of this nonsense is worse. Nobody should have to live with this nonsense. Nobody should have to live with this self-imposed ignorance. We have to realize that only 15 to 18% of the human population of the earth is classified as white. And that's a bad classification because they aren't white. We have to get over the idea of whiteness and the idea of blackness. I've learned more than I wanted to know. I didn't want to know that I could be hired after the first film was shown in my classroom, that I would be hired by several corporations to talk to so-called adults about racism. There is nothing more entertaining or disappointing than talking to people in power in corporations who haven't yet come to realization that they are not the members of a master race, that they are indeed just members of the human race, and that their skin color does not make them better or worse than anybody else. We've got to get over the idea that skin color is an indicator of intelligence or of your worth as a human being. And people, the scariest part about this whole thing for me has been the way the church behaves where racism is concerned. My sisters and my brother and I would sit from the time we were in freshman until I was finished, till I'd moved away, in the choir loft on Sunday morning and sing those wonderful hymns because we were good at that. They were good and I was good at, I always knew the words. We'd sing those wonderful hymns and then they'd pass the collection plate and then we'd go down out of the choir loft and sit in the pews and look up at the preacher, and behind him was a picture of Jesus Christ. And I used to think, why are we sitting in this church listening to this nonsense when this group doesn't even believe in the Jesus that is described in the Bible, which is a man with kinky woolly hair and feet of bronze? You could not put a picture of Jesus like that at the front of the church in the Methodist Church in Riceville, Iowa, and you couldn't say she instead of he when you talked about God in the Osage Methodist Church. People, if this is Christianity, I'll give it up for something else. I'm really angry about this. And I know that many of you are probably evangelical Christians. And if you are, you have my sympathy, but you will not have my admiration, and you will not have my agreement until you agree that Jesus looked like those people that we have crucified, misjudged, described unfairly, treated unfairly. Every child in every school on the face of the earth should read the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. How many of you have seen it? Have any of you read the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization? If you have, put the sign up on so I can see it. Evidently, none of you have. People, that is absolutely astounding. Nile Valley, you know, is a river in Egypt, 4,000 years before the birth of Jesus Christ. That means 6,000 years ago, people in the Nile Valley were doing cataract surgery with metal instruments. Did you know that? And if you didn't know that, why didn't you know that? And now that you do know that, what are you going to do about it? Do you not realize that it's just in the United States of America, people who are the direct descendants of people in the Nile Valley are willing to bow and scrape and agree to be less than because some pale, stale male tells them they are. You cannot believe anything that person says ever again. After someone teaches you that nonsense, then you have the right to say, I don't have to listen to this. You're an educated person because you have this PhD. Obviously, BS means BS, and MS means more the same. And PhD means piled higher and deeper, because we have college instructors in universities where this says pinch up for a bigger view, and the thing is all white. And have you lost me? Because I've lost you. Can you still hear me and see me?
Yes.
Well, yes, all right, then I'll just go ahead and look at the little picture of you. I don't know what's going on here now. It says Zooming has ended. Shall I start over?
It has not ended. Okay. It has not ended.
Okay, it has been. All right, you're still stuck with me then. Now, obviously, I have used the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise with people of all ages in many, many countries of the world. And every time I do it, no matter what the age of the people I'm talking to, I
joined the meeting.
Catherine Caton joined the meeting. Thank you. Welcome to you. Every group I do it with, no matter what their age, I get the people who go through the exercise act exactly the way my third graders did the first year I did it, and every year after that. That is terrifying when you realize that the people who are running the show, the so-called adults who are running the show, if you treat them the way we treat women and people of color in my country, for an hour and a half, they go absolutely crazy. I've been hit during the exercise, and all the things that could possibly happen to you during the exercise with racism happened to me because of that exercise. They had to take me out of town. Three carloads of black rushed me out of town when I did the exercise with a group of teachers in Uniontown, Pennsylvania several years ago. Can you imagine people being so angry just because you say to them, you aren't as smart as the rest of us because you have their own color eyes? If you can't imagine that, you haven't been so-called black in the United States of America. This is the reason I say to people who ask me to speak, don't ask me to talk to you. Don't ask me to talk to you. Call some melanaceous or melanotic woman and then sit down and listen to what she has to say. Because every so-called black woman in this room has forgotten more since breakfast about racism than I will ever learn about racism. You have to know it, because you have to live with it. And you have to send your child, particularly your little boys, out into a society in the United States of America that hates them not because of the color of their skin, but because of the ignorance of the people who have been taught the wrong things in classrooms all over the United States for the last 280 years. Does anybody have a question in this group?
Yes.
Are there any questions? What's the first question?
There are a number of questions, Mama Jane. And I would just ask those who have sent their questions to ask you the questions in the order I received them. I have Miss Shamaya Webb If you asked a question, turn on your camera so Mama Jane can see you and ask your question. We'll go in this order. Ms. Shamaya Webb, Ms. Chavon, Dr. Hodge, and Ms. Saunders. Then the next series of questions, we will go from there. Thank you very much, Mama Jane. Ms.
What's the
Webb,
first question? Go for it.
Hi, how are you? So, how you said interracial and biracial is a lie and built on a lie. How do you feel about the history books being taught from elementary school on up, and how
They're a
they?
lie. They're a lie. We don't
Yeah.
teach true history. If we teach her story instead of his story, we might come up with the truth. We don't teach the history. We don't teach the truth in history. You know that, and I know that. What's your question?
So, how do you feel, or what do you feel like we should do as the people to change that, or to rewrite the history the way it should be?
Open the book to where you're supposed to be according to the schedule for the month. Okay, if you're teaching, open the book to the page that you're supposed to be on. Close the schoolroom door, and then teach the truth. But if the principal comes and looks in your window, he's going to see you teaching, and he's going to see that the page number is right. You're teaching it out of the textbook. Have the textbook open in front of them, and then teach the truth. And there's all kinds of truth out there, and there are all kinds of books that'll tell them the truth, and there are all kinds of children's books that'll tell them the truth. And you need to put those books in the school library, guarantee that those kids can go to the school library and learn the truth. They are not going to learn it out of that social studies book, because we teach anti-social studies. Make no mistake about this. We teach anti-social studies. So what you do is you teach the truth, but you let the principal think you're doing the right thing.
But
That
a lot
makes
of
sense
those
to you?
books, yes, ma'am. But a lot of those books that we're supposed to that we should be able to check out, they're being like banned, or like we
Oh,
can't.
yes, I know. They're banned in the school, but that doesn't keep you from buying them and taking them to school with you and showing them to your children, and then say, hey, this is what is good for these kids. And I have been hired to do the right thing with these children. And this is the right thing for these children. Now, that might not be the right thing for those evangelicals and for those trumpeters, but this is the right. We will not always have this much, but they aren't going to always have this much power. When they're out of power, what are you going to do about the kids who haven't learned the things that they should have learned? You have to teach for the future. You cannot continue to teach for the present because it's gotten really ugly, or for the past because we haven't taught the truth about the past. You've got to teach the truth in the present so that the future will be better than the past has been. You aren't teaching for the present, you're teaching for the future. So you teach the truth. Now, they're going to have a hard time with some of them, but with some of those principals, some of those administrators are going to say, you teach the truth. In fact, that's what my administrators said. They would come to do a story about me, and they'd interview the superintendent. And the first superintendent said, I knew I could fire her, but how could I fire her for doing the right thing? The next one said, I wish I had a building full of Jane Elliott's. So if you've got a good administrator, you can get away with teaching the truth. And that administrator, if you got a good administrator, he will or she will guarantee that you are allowed to teach the truth. You absolutely have to. We cannot go on teaching anti-social studies. In your country, maybe you can get away with it, but you can't, because eventually what happens in my country filters down to everybody on the face of the earth. You know that, and I know that. With instant communication, things that happen in Osage, Iowa today are seen in your country that same day, 15 minutes later. So it's instant communication could save all of us. We could see teachers teaching the truth and getting away with it, and shaming those who are too frightened to teach the truth. I would rather not teach at all if I had to teach the lie. And I could go into a classroom, practically any classroom in the United States today, and teach the right thing. And nobody would say to me, Mrs. Elliott, you're doing the wrong thing, because they'd say, wait a minute, did you hire me to teach a lie or teach the truth? Well, make up your mind, because I have a contract with you. Make up your mind. You are a more valuable human being if you teach the truth about human beings. You don't have the right to lie to those kids. You do not have the right to mistreat those children. And if you're going to do that, then you need to get into another line of work. You are there to teach the truth. Do I make sense to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, you think it's all right to be the color you are?
Yes.
You think it's all right to realize that you were here first and your ancestors were here first? You think it's all right to teach your children that without what we call blacks, there would be no what we call whites. Because all a white person is a person whose ancestors faded, who started out black and then they faded. All white people is the people who had black ancestors, every one of us. And there would be no Christians without Jews. Think about that one. And there would be no men without women. Think about that one. For my part, I like men. I really like men. Let's get on with this. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
No, thank you for asking. Anybody
All
else?
right. Thank you, Mama Jane. We would move on to Miss Lucky, who would ask her own question. And there are two other people queued up. That's after Dr. Hodge and Miss Sanders, Mr. Frunkimeng, and Miss Penna. So you go ahead, Miss Lucky.
Okay. Hello, Miss Elliott. Thank you for speaking with us today. My name is Siobhan.
Wait. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you today. You've got to stop thanking a pale-faced person for telling the truth. You've got to expect us to tell the truth. And when they do, you don't say thank you. You say it's about time, fool. All right?
Period. Okay.
Yeah,
got
that's it. Got it. Okay, your question.
So you answered this in the last in your last response, but I'll ask anyway. What would you tell a child who says they want to be a different color?
Oh, I'd say, wait a minute. Let me show you something. And then I would get out the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018. And I would show them the picture on the front. Twin girls, one melanemic, one melanaceous, have the same parents, Neither of those girls wants to change their color or can change their color. The first modern human beings that evolved on this earth looked like you. They don't look like me. They look like you. And if that's a child of color who wants to change his or her color, you need to say, wait a minute, the first people on earth looked like you. They don't look like me. I faded. You are the color of the first modern human beings that evolved on this earth. Everybody on this earth came from somebody who looks like you. Why in the world would you want to change that? And I know why you want to change that, because you have been given the impression that there's something wrong with the color of your skin. The color of your skin is perfect, particularly, and you need to tell them this, as this climate change gets worse and worse, and more sunlight is allowed to enter our environment, more and more pale-faced people are going to die of melanoma. Melanoma is a skin cancer that you get from not having enough melanin in your skin. Do you know that? Did you realize that? These kids need to know that skin of color is going to keep them alive in the future. And here's something else that's going to happen, which just tickles me to death. I laugh every time I think about it. All these people who are opposed to interracial marriages. I say to people, look, if you've got a daughter or a son whose skin is this color, try to get them to marry someone whose skin is darker, because you will be guaranteeing them that they will live longer. People with this color skin are dying in increasing numbers because they don't have enough protection in their skin from the rays of the sun. You need to say to that little boy, you've got the best skin color for the future of humankind. People of your color were here first, and they will be here after all these pale faces are gone, because that's the way it is. You were here first, and you and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren will be here. You will be the ones in control. Make no mistake about this. It's coming. It's not going to come in my lifetime, because people keep wishing I'd die sooner, but I've lived too long for them already. But your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to be the numerical majority all over the world. They are now. And that is going to be a larger majority than it is today, because white people, what we call white people, are dying out because they can't take them. We cannot be exposed to the rays of the sun as this climate change gets worse and worse. That little boy is exactly the right color, and you need to tell him. You need to get him some You need to get Nile Valley contributions to civilization, and you need to take pictures of it and put them all over the wall and say to these kids, these are the people who did this look like you. They didn't look like Jane Elliott. They looked like you and like your father and like your grandfather. Those are the people who started this whole thing. Your people were here at the beginning. They've got to realize that. And they've got to realize that they will be here the longest. Did I answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
If he wants to change his skin color, give him a whole box of, I think there's some crayon company that has a whole box of skin color crayons. And they're all different shades of brown. See if you can get your hands on that and say to that kid, here's a whole bunch of skin colors. These are all the skin colors, many of this. Oh, or get the Pantone color wheel and put it on the wall and have that kid go up and put his palm on it and then run his hand around it until he comes to a color on the color wheel that matches the color on the back of his hand. And then find that color, a color in the dictionary, look up that color that you think that is in the dictionary, and then show it to that kid and say, here, this is what your color is. Your color is unique. You are special because your great grandparents were here in the beginning, and you will be here the longest. Of all the kids in your community, those kids of color are going to be the ones who are there the longest. So encourage your students, encourage your children to marry color. Even if they are colorless, encourage them to marry color so that we can have more and more people of color who look like the first modern human beings looked. They were beautiful.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
If he wants to change his skin color, give him a box of crayons in which there are several different shades of brown. And say you can have any of these that you want. But you'll notice that there's no white crayon in that box, and there's no black crayon in that box. It's all shades of brown because it's the colors of human beings. He needs to know that, okay?
Okay.
Oh, and here's another thing you can do. Do you celebrate Christmas?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a creche scene, a manger scene with a baby Jesus in it?
No.
You don't have a creche? Well, fix up a manger scene at Christmas time and put a black doll in it.
Okay.
And then watch the parents come and look at oh my God, what's that? And you say, wait a minute, that's the way the baby Jesus looked, because it says so in the Bible. It's time for us to stop teaching the lie and start teaching the truth. And here's another thing you can do. Get a copy of the Peters projection map. Have you ever seen this map before?
I've seen it in a video that you put.
You've seen this one.
Uh-huh.
This is the Mercator projection map. This is the map that they use throughout the schools in the United States. See the size of Greenland? It's on this map, it's larger than South America because the Pope commissioned Mercator to make a map that showed the spread of Christianity. So on this map, the equator is 2/3 of the way down the map, and the countries in the Northern Hemisphere are larger than the countries in the Southern Hemisphere. This is the map that is used throughout the United States of America to educate people as to the size, the shape, and the importance of land masses on the face of the earth. We've got to get this map out of the schools. If this is the map that you have in your classroom, get rid of it. And get a copy of the Peters projection map, which shows Greenland up here, little tiny Greenland, and great big South America, and great big Africa. People, kids need to see a factual picture of the size, the shape, and the location of the land masses on the face of the earth instead of the one that is in your anti-social studies book. Is this an important difference for you?
For sure.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You're damn right, for sure. This is an extremely important difference. You need to realize it. Now, at the bottom of most of the Mercator maps, there's a legend. And in the legend, it isn't on this one, but I've got to get one where it is. On the legend, it says South America is actually 9 times larger than Greenland. But on the map, it shows Greenland larger than South America. This is the Mercator projection map. Get it out of the school. And make sure that that child who wants to change the color of his skin sees the difference in these two maps. Put it on the wall side by side and say, now I'm going to show you why you don't want to change the color of your skin, my friend, because here is where you came from, and here is where we all came from. and look at the size of that sucker. This is what's important. This has been and will be in the future one of the most important continents on the face of the earth. Make no mistake about this. Okay?
Okay.
All right. What are you going to do with that kid now when he wants to change his color?
We're gonna look at the map. We're gonna have a talk.
And you're going to get a box of crayons that has nothing but skin colors in it. And they're all going to be from very, very light brown to very, very dark brown. And you're going to show him, these are the skin colors of the human beings on the face of the earth. There are no white colors in there, and there's no black color in there. We need to realize that, okay?
Okay, will do.
Have I helped you at all?
You have. Thank you.
All right, well, that's because you're intelligent and you're willing to listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mama Jane. There is another question. Dr. David Ahaj stepped out, but insisted I ask his questions. And the first question he has for you, Mama Jane, is that given the very strong rejection of critical race theory and the prevalence of the anti-Black racism, how can we place the African map and that of the diaspora in classes or even in many classes in America? That's the first question he asked.
All right, how can you not? How can you not? How can you not do that? If you are an educator, how can you not do that? And if you don't do that, how in hell do you justify it? How do you justify miseducating the minds of the children of whatever age in your classroom at whatever level? You cannot justify teaching the lie. It's not possible. What's the rest of the question?
The next question, he thanks you that human race is a fact. We are in agreement there, but the subset of racism is antagonistic and vicious. Obviously, Blacks can change this. We have walked in, sat in, sang in, voted in, marched in, died in, and still the race and racist ideology remains firmly planted in American psychology. How can we convince our white brothers and sisters to make a shift if they have not done so already?
They don't have a choice. That's what is absolutely delightful about this whole thing. They think they have a choice. No, they don't, because their numbers are dwindling in the United States of America. And as they become a numerical minority, as they will within 30 years, in fact, it will be less than 30 years. That's what is happening. And as they become less and less numerous, they will become less and less powerful. The latest addition to the Supreme Court is an absolutely brilliant melanaceous woman. You know who she is? Her last name's Brown. That brilliant woman sat there.
Brown.
Yes, sat there while four tall, ignorant, pale, stale males asked her the dumbest questions I have ever heard in my life. And she just took another drink of the water and answered the questions like a civilized, intelligent human being. She made them look like what they are, scared boys who could not ask a question that made sense of that brilliant, melanaceous female. The future is upon us. They cannot continue this because we see the difference. We see that women and people, particularly women of color, have the skills, have the intelligence, have the knowledge, have the ability to do what we have never allowed them to do or allowed them to think they could do. They can, they are, they will, and it's going to take care of itself. Make no mistake about this. When I was a kid, there were no people of color other than in the Black section. Now, the whole world is the Black section. The whole United States is the Black section. It's just pale, stale males who have trouble accepting it. They're going to have to accept it. They have no choice.
Thank you. Thank you for that response. Wonderful, wonderful. Let's hear from Ms. Saunders. You have the opportunity, Ms. Saunders.
Hello. My
there.
question is,
Do you think we have developed enough as a society to see a change in the result of the blue and brown eye experiment with things like increased conversations about race and an easier access to information?
I think, as once again, we have no choice. But number one, what I do is an experiment. It's an exercise. It's not an experiment. I wasn't doing that to learn something from those students. I was doing it to teach them something. It was an exercise. However, I learned that if what I do with the blue-eyed brown exercise is an experiment, then what we have been doing all over the world for the last about 450 years is an experiment. We ought to put a stop to it. It's unethical. It's illegal. You can't experiment with people without their knowledge and their permission. So what we have been doing with people of color all over the world for the last 430 years has been an experiment. We better put a stop to it. We better put a stop to it now. It's coming to an end because finally people are beginning to see when grown-ups see that film with those little so-called white 9-year-old children going through that exercise. They say to me, how could you do that to those poor little children? First group that I talked to is a group of adults. It was a group in Canada after they saw the film that was made in my classroom, the first film that was made in my classroom. They took it to Canada, showed it to a bunch of people in Canada, and then called me and said, we got to get up here. The Canadians are really angry about what you were doing with those poor little kids in Riceville, Iowa. I said, fine. So I went to Canada. My luggage went to New York, so I had to buy a dress before I could go on stage. So then I went in and I sat down. This person sat me down, and here I'm looking out. I'm looking through the window at these people, and there's about 200 people on risers facing this little kidney bean shaped dais in the front of the room. And I said, what's that? And he said, that's where you're going to sit. I said, who are they? And he said, those are the people who have come here to question you. I said, this looks like a setup. He said, it is. Let's go. And he took me by the arm. He took me down. He sat me down on one of those chairs. He said, now this is Jane Elliott. She has come to explain to you what she did with her little blue-eyed, with her children, the third grade children in Riceville, Iowa. Almost the first person, this woman about probably 45, 46 years old, stood up and said, how could you do that to those poor little white children for a day? I said, madam, if you are upset about what happened to those poor little white children for a day, you must be absolutely infuriated by what happens to children of color in your country and mine on a daily basis. And she said, and this is exactly what she said, that's different. They're used to it. They can take it. Now that is the IQ level of that woman, about 91 on a good day. I was absolutely furious. And so was another woman who said, I lived through this in Germany. I'm Jewish. We were going to school, and one day the headmaster came in with 2 SS troopers, and they said, you Jews will no longer bow and say, good morning, Herr Headmaster. You will salute and say Heil Hitler. She said, I watched those who valued their life more than anything else, salute and say Heil Hitler. She said, those who valued their religion more than anything else continued to bow and say, good morning, Herr Headmaster. She said, they disappeared and we never saw them again, but we know where they went. She said, Mrs. Elliott, your students are very fortunate. They will never allow to happen in your society what we allowed to happen in ours. They will see it coming and they'll put a stop to it. I want children of color and children of all colors to see the difference between the first 4 years with Donald Trump and what he caused, and the next 2 years with Joe Biden, and see what he has to clean up. And what we have to clean up, it will take us probably 10 to 15 years to clean up the mess that horrible person constructed in 4 years. You, as a young person, have to guarantee that kind of thing will not happen in your community. You have to decide that your society is not going to go the way of a Trumpian society. You are not going to repeat the mistakes that Hitler made. You must not allow that to happen. And it's up to young people to put a stop to it. You have a voice, and you have the right to say no more. Do not tell a Black joke in my presence. Do not tell an anti-Christian joke in my presence. Do not tell that kind of joke in my presence, because I won't tolerate it. There are things we must not tolerate. Elie Wiesel said you must not tolerate the intolerable. And if it's intolerable for another person, it's intolerable for you because you are that person's 30th to 50th cousin. You don't have the right to say, well, you know, they don't really mean it. Go to my website, download the printed learning materials. The first page is a set of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't racist. Here's one of them. What are we going to do to alleviate the Black problem? You know what the Black problem is? The Black problem is white people. The only way we can alleviate that problem is to recognize what the problem is. We don't recognize the problem. It's a white problem. You need to realize that your skin color is not the problem. Self-imposed ignorance on the part of those who treat you unfairly because of their ignorance, that's the problem. And the answer to that problem is education. And I don't mean indoctrination, I mean education. I can't see you now, you have disappeared.
No, just be talking. I'm sure she's still on the screen.
Okay, all right. I told her what you go to my website, download the printed learning materials, the typical statements, and then the clarifications of the statements, and here's the one you're going to have the most fun with, commitment to combat racism. There are 18 things on this page that you can do to change the level of racism in your country and in yourself. And you have to start by changing it in yourself. And if you allow someone to put anyone down because of the color of their skin, you are part of the problem. And you need to say, I'm not going to allow that to happen in my presence. It will sharply curtail the number, lessen the number of people who want to have anything to do with you. Because you'll be one of those who will not put up with racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric remarks. People do not like to be around somebody like me because they have learned that it's all right to say unacceptable things. No, it isn't all right in my presence. So you will not be loved, but at least you'll know you're doing the right thing. My dad used to say to us on a daily basis, you know the difference between right and wrong. Now do the right thing, goddammit. And for the rest of my life, I do the right thing. I've lost a lot of friends. I've lost a lot of money, lost a lot of jobs, but I'm still determined to do the right thing. My father, at the age of probably 60, saw the film that was made in my classroom as my blue-eyed, brown-eyed kids went through that exercise. He was probably 50 years old. And he had on his bib overalls and his blue chambray shirt rolled up with his sleeves halfway up to his elbow. And he sat and watched that film with my mother and me. And after it was over, he stood up. He took his big red handkerchief out of the back pocket of his bib overalls, blew his nose, wiped his eyes, and said, I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old. Now, psychologists can damn me for doing the exercise. Sociologists can say that's a terrible thing to do. Christians can say, how can you do that to those poor little white children? And I remember my father saying, I wish somebody had taught me that when I was 9 years old. It would have changed his life in a very positive way.
Wow, thank you, Mama Jane.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you for the question.
Yes. Our Dean Bell has a question, and I'll, take our question before we go back to the other. Dean Bell, you have a question for Mama Jane Elliott.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Indy. I'm on medical leave, but I could not miss this lecture, so I had to come on. But I'm not going to show my face.
That's fine. Understood.
But
thank you for being here.
No problem. I do have a question for you, Ms. Elliott. So I wanted to ask you, name some of the people, well, I'll say educators that you lecture with across the country that have darker skins than you. Like what people that you lecture with that talk about that have the same passion as you. Give us some names so I can look them up and so we can look at some of their writings as well.
Oh my goodness, read Bell Hooks, whatever Bell Hooks is.
Okay,
written.
Bell Hooks, right.
Read whatever, Zora Neale Thurston has written. Read whatever, who was the woman who wrote, oh Lord. Go to my website, download the printed materials, download the bibliography. I could run you through a whole mess of books and you don't have time for that. Michelle Alexander, read The New Jim Crow. Read Gordon Allport's The Nature of Prejudice. Read Garlinda Burton's Never Say Nigger Again. Oh Lord. Read Kenneth Clark's Prejudice in Your Child. Read Robert Cohen's The Color of Man. Read Martin and, oh, read this one, Martin and Malcolm in America, written by James Cone. Read Ellis Cose's Colorblind. Read Ellis Cose's Rage of a Privileged Class. Just, oh, read Vine Deloria's Custer Died for Your Sins. There are, oh, there's probably a hundred, oh, if I wrote down all the books that I
So Ms.
read.
Elliott, I wanted to ask you, who has actually gone with you to lecture, like what you're doing now? Have
Nobody
you
goes
done,
with me. Nobody goes with me to lecture.
no, I thought not. I was just wondering about that. No,
No,
so I was just
number
wondering.
one, people
Yeah.
people are willing to hire me, a white woman,
Uh-huh.
to say things, but they will
Right.
not allow a person of color to say the same
That's
things. If a
exactly what
person
I
of color,
wanted to hear.
hey, if
Yeah.
a person of color went with me, they are taking their life in their hands, and I know
Right.
that, and so do they.
Right.
And when
Thank
they ask me to
for
speak, someplace, I say to them, look, have a white male introduce me. Don't put yourself in that position. There's no reason for you to risk your life again to have me come to your campus. Have a white male introduce me, because
Right.
I get better reception if some pale, stale male introduces me instead of some brilliant person of color.
Right. Absolutely.
We're talking
Thank you so
about
much for
ignorance
being
here.
honest. Thank
Did I
you.
answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you for asking.
Thank you. All right, let's go back to the order. Mr. Frunkimeng, you had a question after Ms. Penna. Then we'll take not more than 3 questions after that to give Mama Jane some respite. So Mr. Frunkimeng, Ms. Penna, Mr. Easter, Prince William, and Elena, let's hear from you. Mr. Frunkimeng, if you are on, ask your question.
Grandma Jane, I'm
Hello there.
from Lowell. I was born in Cameroon, and I really want to thank you for appearing on African Hour last month. And I would tell you that my viewers from Africa, they loved you, and they really want me to ask you that, what can you tell Africans watching this show with all what is going out, coming out from the West, looking down on Africa, that they are nothing, they cannot go up to, they are the dark continent. So that some of them listened to the audio, they couldn't, when they saw the video, they could not believe it was a white grandma talking the way you are talking. And they really pray for you. And that's the question I want to really ask you. What would you tell your passionate viewers and audience from Africa?
Don't believe a damn word that you hear out of people who say we are superior because of the color of our skin. And don't go to church and believe that Jesus looked like the picture we have of Jesus. He didn't. Realize that we are speaking from ignorance, self-imposed ignorance. The truth is out there if we would just go after it. But we are not encouraged to learn the truth in the United States of America about skin color, because we are scared to death that if we tell the truth, people who have been on the receiving end of this nonsense are going to do unto us as we have done unto them. So what you have to do is discount most of what you hear coming from this country, or if it's talking about racism or about race, because there's only one race. And we still haven't gotten that message into all the people in this country. It's going to get to them. It's going to get there. But in the meantime, you're going to have to put up with their self-imposed ignorance, because you get encouraged and you get rewarded in this country for being ignorant about the topic of race. You get rewarded handsomely for keeping your mouth shut about it and just going along to get along. I am angry about what is still happening and the things that are still being said in this country about Africans. If the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, isn't present in every classroom in the United States of America, I'm going to raise all kinds of nonsense, because this has to stop. This has to stop. These kids have to be taught the truth. They have to be taught the truth about the people who were here and who are their ancestors. We have to teach the truth. And in Africa, you have to ignore the lies that you're hearing coming from the Western world and say to students, that isn't true. Let me show you what the truth is. You see this magazine right here? You see this book right here? You see this tape right here? Here is the truth. Here's what was happening 6,000 years before Donald Trump and company were even alive. You have to teach African children the truth, because you cannot believe what they are learning from what they hear from Western and European civilization. It isn't true. That's the way it is. But we have our ministers, our college instructors all teach the same crap that isn't true, because that is what they have been hired to do, is to maintain the status quo. We have to teach children for the future instead of lying about the past to make the present good for some of us and really bad for the rest of us. We have to teach the truth. And you have to teach your African students the truth, regardless of what they hear on the television, regardless of what they hear in their anti-social textbooks. You have to teach them the truth. In order to do that, your educators have to learn the truth. They have to self-educate and get past what they learned in college and teach the truth. It can be done. It has to be done. That's the future of humankind.
Thank you very much. And I would like, if I may, convey the prayer of my ancestors to wish you that God should endow you with wonderful health, and that you are a godsend, and continue doing what you are doing, Grandma. Thank you very much.
Wait a minute. Don't wish me long life and good health. My husband's been gone for 10 years. I would give anything, including life itself, to be where he is. I will stay here and do this work as long as I absolutely have to. But when I'm no longer able to open my mouth and say something honest or remember what I need to say, then I know that somebody will say to me, if I go to Washington State, Mrs. Elliott, it's possible for you to go on away. I know that, and I'll take advantage of that, because if I'm no longer useful, then I don't need this and you don't need me. But as long as there's a racist bone in the body of somebody running this country, I will be there to defeat that racist bone, because that is the job of all of us, to destroy the idea of several different races and the superiority of one. We're all one race. And I will say that until my dying breath, which is, I've been threatened with having it end a whole lot sooner. However, we have to get over the idea of several different races, and it's up to you and me and people like us, because we are 30th to 50th cousins, to refuse to tolerate the intolerable. We absolutely have to do that. And I'll do that as long as I live. And so will you, because you have no choice. No, well, thank you. But without somebody who looked like you, there would not be somebody who looks like me.
Thank you very much, Mama Jane. You are because I am because you are. That message is well gotten. Miss Clarissa Penacotel, you have the floor.
Jasmine Payton.
Okay, so I just wanted to thank you again, Jane.
Join the meeting.
Miss Elliott, for blessing us with your presence. It is forever grateful. I've been following you for years and listening to your education, and
I can't have been following me for many years. You aren't over 18 years old. Look at you. You're gorgeous.
Oh, you're the sweetest. No, I'm closer to 50, but thank you. And so what I wanted to just add to your wisdom is in ways on how we're able to heal the trauma that's built inside of the body, which is creating the pathology of our existence in those that are pale skin and melanated skin. And we all come from somewhere and something. So because this trauma is enrooted and embedded inside of us, learning how to find ways to break that pathology is what seems to be one of the barriers, right, in how we're able to heal. So my question is, how is it that we heal that trauma that's inside of the bodies of the pale skin? How, because ultimately, until that trauma is healed, it doesn't seem like we're able to truly make way and move forward, right? Because when we look at the research and we realize the lack of the empathy and the compassion that follows, again, that comes with, I believe, the trauma that's built inside of many of us. So that's the part that I'm curious about, and how do we begin to heal that in pale skin?
Forget about healing it in pale skin. That's up to pale skin to be healed their own trauma. It's not up to you to heal the trauma of pale skinned people. It's up to you to see to it that pale skinned people aren't allowed to traumatize people who don't look like them. And the way you do that is by refusing to allow your students to be exposed to that nonsense. Refuse to allow your children, if you have children, to be exposed to that nonsense. Refuse to allow those racist statements to be made. Refuse to allow that history told that isn't true. Insist that they tell the truth. Insist that they rewrite the history books so that they tell the true history instead of his story. Insist that every child be seen as a responsible, respectable member of the human race, every single one of them, and that their background is important as they are. If you're allowing children to be traumatized by education, you need to change the education. You can't change the child, but you can change the educators, and you can change the education. This is not impossible. This is a possible thing that you can do. You can go to the school and you can say, here are 5 elements that are being taught in this building every day on a daily basis, hourly, that teaches these kids that they are less than. That is not what education is supposed to do. It's supposed to lead them out of ignorance, not perpetuate the ignorance of those who came before them. You have to look very carefully at your newspapers. You have to look at the magazines that are allowed into the classroom. You have to look at the books that are in the classroom. You have to go through them and you have to say, wait a minute, this one is contributing to racism. Take it out of this building. Show it to the teachers so that the teachers recognize it when they see it and refuse to use this book. We do this in this country, people do this with books about children of color all day, every day. Right now, they are banning books all over the United States of America because of our evangelical Christians and our Republicans. They want to change education so that children don't know the truth. If that is what is happening in schools in Africa, then it's up to you, who are older than you look, to go into the schools and say, here's what's happening. Look at this book and this book and this book. We want you to have books in this classroom that tell the truth instead of that perpetuate the lie. You have the power to do that. You're an attractive, young, melanaceous woman, and you will scare. I suspect that you're taller than I am, but don't be too proud of that. Everybody's taller than I am. But you have gained the respect of people in your community. You have to use that respect to change what is happening in the school so that your children are not being traumatized because of somebody else's ignorance about skin color. The number one thing that the United States exports is ignorance about skin color. And you have to stop taking that export and say, we're not going to import any more ignorance from the United States. You want to say, send us some books that tell the truth, we'll be glad to get them. You want to send us your television shows that tell the truth, we'll be glad to get them. But we are not going to import any more of your self-imposed ignorance. You are not going to traumatize our children any longer. Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely does. Thank you so much.
Can you do that?
Oh, absolutely.
Can you get with a whole bunch of people? It doesn't need to be a whole lot of people. Get with a bunch of people and say, here are the things we want to do. Go to my website, look at the commitments to combat racism, hand them out in a group of people and say, now, each of you is to choose one of these commitments, put the date beside it, decide to do it for a month. And then at the end of the month, come back here and tell me what you learned by doing it. And then see if, and you can change this situation in your environment if you choose to, or you can go along and say, it's not my fault. It is, by God, your fault if you put up with it. If you tolerate the intolerable, then you are perpetuating the intolerable. You, as a young, adult, melanaceous woman, have the power to say to everybody around you, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore. I am not going to watch children traumatized by ignorant individuals who think that there's more than one race. There's only one race, and it started with us, and it's going to end with us. So get over it, folks. You don't like black, that's your problem. I don't like black either. I like dark, dark, dark brown, and that's what we all are. You are shades of brown. Get over blackness and whiteness. They don't exist. And you'll have an awful time with your young males when you tell them You aren't black, darling. You're darling, but you aren't black. But you're adorable, and I love you because you are male. Oh, don't offend your black males until you absolutely have to, because they are what is going to make more black males and females. Only you're going to be shades of brown, all right?
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. All right. We'll take a couple of more questions. A couple of more questions, if Mama Jane will permit. I have a question here from Mile Easter. So Mile Easter, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Can you turn on your video?
I will gladly. I'm on my phone, but
All right. If you can have your video, we're going to pass on you.
I saw him for an instant.
no,
All right.
I'm here.
Come, go
There
right
you are.
ahead.
There you are.
Hi there. Yes. I'm a student at the university. I just have a question to.
You want to speak up a little louder?
Oh, yeah, sure. Student at Tuskegee University. My name is Miles Easter, and I have a lot of peers in my classes, or maybe my roommates in my apartment, or my classmates I attend class with, or study group sessions and everything. And is the way they talk. I mean, they're black. They have the same skin color as me, maybe a little darker, maybe a little lighter, but we're all black. But
No, you are. No, you are.
excuse me, I'm
you
sorry,
are.
not black.
You're
I'm
all
sorry,
brown.
not black. Yeah.
Just a minute now. Just one of these things just quit working. So I don't know how we're going to do this now. I won't be able to hear you.
I apologize.
Well, go ahead quickly. Talk loudly, because this is all I can hear with this
Talk,
one now.
talk loudly. Talk loudly.
Do you want me to log in my computer instead?
I don't know. Probably.
Maybe you can hear me much better on my
Miles,
MacBook.
what is your question? Ask your
Yes.
question. We have many other people waiting to ask questions.
Yes.
What
My
is your
question is what are your thoughts on the black people that use the N-word as a way to be cool? Like, for example, what's good with you, my NIDDA?
Look. The N-word may be cool for you, but it's cruel for somebody else. And before you use that word, you want to decide whether you want to be cool or you want to be cruel. And for some people, that N-word has been a matter of life and death. They have died because of the N-word. People have died in this country and in your country and all over the world because it's been all right to use the N-word and to treat people like they are the N-word instead of treating them like respectable human beings. If you make a person into less than a person by the language that you use, or you use language that is offensive to a whole lot of people, or that says the wrong thing about a whole lot of people, you better change your vocabulary. Now, I know that to some people of color, males particularly, the N-word is a part of their language. Well, there are some things we have to give up sometimes. And one of the things we're going to have to give up is using the N-word where people who take it the wrong way hear it. If you're going to use it only where it's going to be heard by people in your little group, go ahead. But if anybody else is hearing it, they immediately get an unpleasant reaction to you because of that word. If that word is causing you problems, it seems to me it would be a good idea to give it up unless you're with only those folks, or only those folks will hear it. Sorry, but it has been misused so dreadfully and so consistently and in such ugly, ugly ways in this country that it really ought to be something that you don't want. If you ever have children, you aren't going to want your children to use that word. You aren't going to want your teachers to use that word about your children. Think of it that way. Would you want your little brother to be called that word by his first grade teacher?
No.
Well, if you wouldn't want that to happen, then maybe you need to say to your friends, it's all right in our group, but are you going to like it if we apply it to your girlfriend or your mother or your grandmother? Want to think that over? Did I answer your question?
Yes, you answered it. Thank you so much.
Okay, is it
Thank
all
you
right?
very, very much. Let's move on to Prince William. Quickly, your question, Prince, if you are on. Prince William, you left? All right, I'll cede your place to Dean Bell once more. Dean Bell, ask us your question. I saw you left another on the chat.
No, it's not a question. I just made a response. I just wanted to well, everybody can read the response. I don't know if Ms. Elliott can read the response or not, but I just wanted to say that I was really happy that she admitted that if me as a darker skinned woman, I'm darker than you, Miss Elliott, if I would lecture with you on the same topic, it would be more, I would not get the respect that you have at maybe a PWI talking about this topic. And so my question is, when will this change? How would this change? How can we get more darker skinned people to talk about this topic and be respected?
We have no choice anymore. The lady who is on the Supreme Court has taught us by her behaviors, if anybody watches it, that what we have been learning about women of color is an absolute disgusting lie. If you allow that kind of behavior and that kind of attitude to persist, instead of saying, wait a minute, people, and I say to people who ask me to come and speak to them, I say, wait a minute, don't you have some women of color who can speak to you? Well, no, we want you. No. Hire a woman of color and pay her what you would pay me, because her life is in danger when she stands up to talk. And she isn't sure that anybody's going to listen to her because she's talking to a group of people who are living with self-imposed ignorance. Now, you hire a woman of color first, and then after you hear her, number one, you might not need me, but if you do need me, then I'll come back and say to you the same things that she said, but I'll get away with it because of the color of my skin. And that alone should teach you a whole lot about racism and about self-imposed ignorance. There is no reason on God's green earth for any person of color to listen to anything that I have to say, except for the fact that this isn't the kind of thing that most of us so-called white people are inclined to say. Most white people have too much to lose to say the things that I do. I have nothing to lose. My kids are grown. They produce children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. My husband is dead. My oldest son is dead. I've got nothing to lose. Somebody decides to shoot me, I say, go for it, fool. And now when I go on a college campus, I haven't for the last year and a half because of Donald Trump and the evangelical Christians who don't want to hear what I have to say. But when I was still going on college campuses, invariably, there would be 3 little boys about the 3rd row up wearing those red caps that say, make America hate again. It says make America great again, but they mean make America hate again. And while I'm talking, they're pointing their fingers at me, making them into a gun and pointing them at me. And I stop what I'm saying. I say, look, fellas, I know what you're talking about. You'd like to see me dead because of what I do to decrease the level of racism in this country. You can kill me. Go ahead. That won't bother me at all. I'll be into a better place. However, you need to know that if you kill me because of what I'm doing to decrease the level of racism in this country, you might make a hero out of me. You might make me into a martyr. And you might have to spend the rest of your lives celebrating Jane Elliott Day once a year. Now, you want to do that? And then they all do this and make a cross out of it. No. I say, fine, then shut up and listen while I'm talking. And before I finish my remark, those 3 guys get over the back of their seats, go through the aisle, get down the aisle, and get out of the house, out of the building as fast as they can. Because when I point to them, everybody in the room knows who I'm talking to. And they've just put themselves into a very precarious situation. People, it should be a precarious situation for you every time you make a racist remark. You should have somebody should be standing by your side and saying, you know what you just did? Do you know what can happen to you as a result of that? You don't have the right to make racist remarks anymore. Give it up. You've lived a lie long enough. You've been able to express the lie long enough. That lie is no longer acceptable among civilized human beings. And if you're a civilized human being, you're not going to exhibit that kind of behavior in my presence. Now, they can do it when they leave my presence, but when they're in my presence, they better watch their mouths. Does that make sense to you? Hello.
You. Thank you very much. I'm sure that makes perfect sense to anyone listening.
Look, listen to this. The only thing necessary for the perpetuation of evil is for good people to do nothing. As long as people of color do nothing where racism is concerned, that will be seen as acceptance by people who are colorless. And they'll think it's all right with him. It's all right to say those things around him. It's all right to say them around her. No, it isn't all right to say them. The only thing necessary for the perpetuation of evil is for good people to do nothing. When you see evil, you name it. You identify it, you call it out, and you refuse to tolerate it because you know that skin color is not an indicator of your intelligence or your worth as a human being. Stop accepting that crap. Go on. I'm sorry. Here she goes again.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fopa, you have a question, and Miss Barbara on iPhone. So I will take those two questions. There are a slew of other questions. We can talk about that after these two questions, but we might end it with these two questions. Mr. Fopa.
Hello, I apologize first of all because I'm in a very windy area, so I don't know how the sound quality is. So my question for Mama Jane is as follows. As a Black parent, as a parent, dark-skinned parent, when I get to talk about the injustice to the kids, sometimes it can get really passionate. And the fear is in that passion, you might transmit a little bit more than just knowledge. You might unconsciously transmit some resentment, which is not what we want towards for our children to feel towards fellow humans. And my question is, out of your years of experience, are there any suggestions in how to, correct the wrongs when teaching the children without necessarily risking to transmit that resentment or the pain that might turn into resentment that might negatively affect them down the road?
Look, if you don't resent the way people of color are treated by colorless people, there's something wrong with you. Of course you resent that. You should resent it. And you should let those people who are guilty of doing it know that you resent it. And you should tell your children that it's sensible and human to resent being treated unfairly because of somebody else's ignorance. You have the right to say to your kid, we are what the first human beings look like. Make no mistake about this. And if that fool doesn't understand that, that's his problem. Just make sure that he knows that you will not accept his problem being visited upon you. No person of color should have to defend their color, their skin color. That is not something you choose. It is something that you were lucky enough to be born with. And because you are the right color, because you have a good shade of brown, you're going to be here much longer than those pale faces are. And you need to assure your students that that's the truth. And they need to live with the truth, but they'll only hear it from you. But you can't send them out thinking that everybody thinks the way you do, because they don't. You're going to have to warn them, look, there are ignorant people out there who don't realize that they too came from Africa. They don't understand because they haven't been taught that. They have been indoctrinated with a lie. Do not accept that lie. You have to tell your children, here's the truth about you. Get the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. Put that into your kids' heads so that when somebody makes some stupid remark, they can say, wait a minute, that came out of Egypt 6,000 years ago. Are you sure you want to make that remark? And when you find out all the wonderful things that we got out of Egypt, you're going to arm your child with all those facts. And he's going to go to school or go to church or go out to play, knowing things that none of the colorless kids know. And most of the children of color don't know because they haven't been told the truth. So you as a parent have to tell them the truth and send them out really armed with the truth instead of being vulnerable to the lie. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much.
It's up to you as a father to teach your kids the truth. And then when some teacher makes a mistake, it's up to you to go to the teacher and say, look, fool, I don't mean to call you fool, but what I meant to say was, you're wrong. Do not tell this crap to my kid because this is not true. Here's the truth of the matter. Give a copy of the book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, to every classroom that your child is enrolled in, and insist that the teacher use that during show and tell time.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Does that help at all?
Absolutely does. And I will get a copy of the book for sure.
Get a copy of the book and read it to your kids. Read it with them, because you're going to learn some stuff that you never were told. Because that would not have kept you in your place as far as so-called white people are concerned. We have to keep you in your place. We have to keep you not knowing the truth. And if you don't know the truth, you can't teach it to your children. So you learn the truth, you teach it to the children, and the minute the teacher tells you the child something that is not what you have taught them, you need to go to the teacher and say, here's a book that you need to read, fool.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You have to educate the educators. Go for it.
Oh, thank you, Mama Jane. Miss Barbara on the iPhone, are you still available? So
I am still available. I'm right here. How you doing?
right, please ask your question.
Hi, Mrs. Jane. I just want you to know that it's an honor to actually hear you. I mean, it's one thing to see you on a video, but it's another thing to have you right here in person. And my question is, has it bothered you how this country has regressed so much since the initiation of your experiment?
Number one, it is an experiment. Number two, we have taken such drastic steps backward in the last 12 years because of people's resistance to a Black man in the White House. When Barack Obama became president, I thought, there, I can do what Whoopi Goldberg said. I can put my suitcase down now, leave this country. And because I didn't realize how determined anti-Black people were. And I have watched horrible things happen as a result of people reacting negatively to the presence of a Black man in the White House. I remember when Richard Nixon said to a group of people, I'm trying to save the White House for you white people. I thought that was just Richard Nixon. That was 40% of the population of the United States. So then we got a person who was very Hitlerian in his behaviors, and he became president of the United States because he would support that kind of attitude. And now we're fighting to keep him from getting reelected because of that attitude. It never occurred to me that we would take such drastic steps backward after the steps that we took forward that led us to elect Barack Obama. We're going to have to redo everything that we did in the last 50 years. Is going to have to be redone because of the ignorance, the self-imposed ignorance of the American population.
Well, has any
Now, I can't hear you because
system...
these are no longer working, so I can't hear you anymore. And I don't know how to make that happen. Okay?
Okay.
All right. I'll get on my
Join the
telephone
meeting.
if you want to call my telephone. You can do it that way, but I can't hear you anymore now.
All right. You could key in on the telephone, but just stay on your video.
It's going to have to be closed captioned. Can you closed caption this? It says closed caption has been enabled, has it?
Yes, it is on. Somebody should request that. I'll enable it.
Well, I can see lots of lovely people, but I can't hear anything because this has to be closed caption now because my
can somebody request closed captioning?
It's already, but the problem is she has to turn it
Bill
on.
Lee, what can we do?
Computer.
Resources are non-existent. Plus, how Atlanta's business community.
Give me a telephone number and I'll call you. Hello.
Yes.
All right, you call me. Can you hear me?
It's a telephone
call
number.
641 732-3096. I'll run and get the telephone. Don't go away. I'll be back.
That won't work like that. She has to call us.
I think that's what she's going to do.
No, she'll dial on the phone, right? She'll dial on the phone.
Put her on speakerphone. Put her on speakerphone so everybody can hear her on speakerphone. If she put
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Use the country code and then 641-732-3096. Can somebody do that?
So she can use the phone to hear us while she just talks and we'll still hear
Yeah,
her.
that's
So-
it. Danny, do you want
We
to
have a
call
number that I
number?
can call. Put it on the screen. Hello.
I called you. I just picked up. I'm one of the participants and I just called. I can put it on speaker.
Fantastic. Do that, would you please?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Can everyone hear
Yes.
her? Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
I want you to notice, I think this is a woman doing this. I think it's a woman who's doing this, right?
Yes.
They came up with a word for male. They came up with a word for man, and it's male, M-A-L-E. Then in order to get the word for a woman, they had to add the chemical symbol for iron to the word for male. Female, chemical symbol for iron added to a male is a woman.